Excited to sit down today with Brian Kellerman, CEO and partner of GoGather, corporate event management company. I'm Sean Whalin. I'm one of the founders and CEO of HopSkip. For those of you that might not be super familiar with us, we're a software company that provides a product to event professionals that streamlines how they source and contract business events at hotels. I wanted to introduce Brian. I'll let him give a brief background on himself, his company. We're going to today talk about the key factors that kind of drive a positive event atmosphere. And I couldn't think of anyone better than Brian to join the conversation.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's great to be with you today and looking forward to the conversation. As you said, my name is Brian. I'm also a co-founder of GoGather and CEO as well. And GoGather is a full-service third-party event management agency. We primarily work with medium to large-sized corporations on a wide range of different event types, whether it's sales kickoff, sales incentive programs, supplier partnership programs, all different types of things. And what we really try to do is obviously really first understand our clients' business, their big picture goals and objectives, and really help them make sort of actionable and meaningful experiences and connections at their events. And the first step in doing that is exactly what you just alluded to, which is really creating a positive event environment. It's what I spend most of my days thinking about. So looking forward to the conversation for sure.
We are as well. And I guess that's a good segue into my first question for you, Brian. Let's start by zooming out a bit. When you think about events that really stand out, what do you think creates that kind of electric, positive event atmosphere? What are those ingredients?
I think it really starts in the very beginning with sort of even the inception of why. Why are we doing this in the first place, right? And having a very clear picture. And so the first thing that we talk about is sort of that stakeholder and certainly leadership buy-in, right? Let's make sure that leadership is truly having a conversation and is coming together, strategically and understanding what is the purpose of this program. And as long as we start with that, then we can start to incorporate all of those other sort of meaningful interactions and experiences that then ultimately support that big picture goal. And obviously those are typically going to be tied to the broader business goals. What are the goals of the business, whether it's for this year or for a certain quarter or for the attendees at the event, whether that's supplier partners or employees or customers. What are the things that we're actually wanting these people to do, and be specific, right? And get that leadership involvement and that engagement and sort of get everybody behind those primary objectives. From there, we absolutely let's start to incorporate some meaningful experiences. And for us, that sort of starts with fun. Especially sort of post-pandemic, we've seen just incredible enthusiasm for in-person gatherings, right? People are very excited to get together. But at the same time, people are also very stingy, I can't think of the right word, with their time, right? Their time is valuable. If you're going to take the time, right, to be out of the office, it needs to, they're not going to waste their time. They're sophisticated. They understand whether or not there's value in them participating and being away from the office in these types of events. So certainly what we like to do is definitely lean into that sort of enthusiasm and that energy and incorporate some fun elements, help them break down barriers, create environments that are conducive to networking, because that is sort of the primary objectives that we see from the attendees' perspective. Is yes, they want to come and learn and they want to understand, from the host of the programs, what big key points are, but at the same time, their interest, and that's what we always want to think about as well, is what is the attendees' interest, not just what is the host's interest in hosting the program, but what is the attendees' interest in attending. And we see time and time again that ability to network and build a community is key.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And that's such a good breakdown. I'm curious, how much of the energy would you say comes from the venue itself versus the people planning behind the scenes to make the experience kind of really come to life?
That's an excellent question. I think venue is absolutely key. I think leaning into the venue, and that's not to say there's one venue specifically that's best for everyone. I think venues are very specific. They're in a lot of ways we think of them like homes. Like a realtor might think about placing the right person or family or couple in a home. You almost think of it the same way for a corporate group. It's has very much to do with, okay, where is our user base? Where are we asking people to travel into? What is the level of commitment that it takes to even to get to the event in the first place for people? And then once we're there, what are the logistics on the ground? What is the sort of overall just atmosphere of the place? We just told a great story. We had a client that wanted to be in a warm location in October, Phoenix, Scottsdale area. They loved that area, but golf was a huge part of their program. And anybody that's a golfer sort of knows that late fall season is sort of the overseeding time. And so we couldn't just go right into a venue and go, okay, well, here's a great golf course, without understanding what are the other aspects of this program that are important to this client. And so we were able to absolutely put them in the right venue, but finding the course that was going to be, in the condition that it needed to be able to host their event.
That's super interesting. And obviously I'm a little biased being one of the founders of a platform that sources venues. So I'm super, super interested to hear from your perspective kind of on how the venue can either, play a positive role or not have such a positive impact on the experience for the attendees and for the planning team and for the client for that matter.
Absolutely.
So digging into that venue piece a little more, Brian, when you're evaluating spaces, what are some of those key things that you or your team typically look at to make sure it's going to support the event's goals?
The market has become more sophisticated. Budgets are tight in certain cases. And so we need to make sure that we have alignment around budget, because of course we would love, the very high-end venues. There's some amazing places around the world. Everybody wants to be there, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we have alignment around budget ultimately, right? We can't go and present options to stakeholders and to leadership teams that just aren't feasible. And so the first thing is to really truly understand sort of what the budget is and get clarity into all of the different aspects of that as well. It's not just necessarily going to be, let's say, room rate, right? Travel and transportation costs, there's food and beverage costs, there's AV costs, there's different, costs around union issues, all of the different things, right, that we sort of need to understand as we go into a venue. And so really having a lot of clarity there first is kind of where we start. Of course, the physical sort of space and capacity, right? Everybody sort of thinks about that as well. Okay, we've got 500 people. We need X number of sleeping rooms. We need X number of, square feet of meeting space or number of breakouts, that sort of thing. And I feel like that's where a lot of people obviously start. You can't stop there, right? You need to keep digging. Like the idea of accessibility, amenities, what are the opportunities that attendees are going to have outside of our structured meeting space, because we're asking people to be there 24 hours a day, of course, right? They're there for the entire program, but we're not necessarily hosting them. So, right, what are the things we're going to be able to do in the mornings or the evenings, that sort of thing, based on where the venue is. And there's a lot of creative ways that you can sort of deal with that. We've seen venues that are remote and amazing. And we sort of lean into that by creating sort of hospitality lounges or areas that people can sort of hang out during unstructured times and not feel the need to just sort of go back to their room and be isolated. Whereas, when we go into big cities, we also lean into that idea where a lot of companies may be concerned that there could be distractions, perhaps. Las Vegas is a great example of this. We hear a lot of clients come and say, well, we can't go to Vegas because nobody would show up for the meeting. And that's not at all true, right? It's about sort of leaning into the space that we're in, and addressing the fact that there are a million different entertainment options and things to do in Vegas. And let's make sure there's an opportunity for folks to do that want to, but at the same time, make sure that our content and our program is compelling enough that it draws them back in. So just so many different considerations for sure.
Yeah, I definitely have some sympathy for you there. There's so many variables that I know goes into the decision-making process there to make sure the event is finding the right fit for a venue. Do you ever have the feeling when you kind of walk into a venue, although it checks all the boxes on paper, but you just have a feeling when you walk into that ballroom maybe that it isn't the right fit, or on the opposite side, it 100% is the right fit, but it's that feeling that you wouldn't be able to get unless you were doing a site visit, unless you were really boots on the ground.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think years and years of experience definitely kicks in there.
Yeah,
Having been to many of the major venues, you sort of already understand, right? You've actually been there. That's always a positive. But at the same time, you're right. But believe it or not, Sean, it's not so often the idea that physically the space doesn't feel right. It's actually the fit with the team. And that's where I think the site visit is also important. Of course, yeah, we need to go physically see the space and make sure that it's going to be the right fit. But you can tell a lot of that just by purely the dimensions, the specs, as well as photos. It's when you go
sure.
and actually interact with the team, because those are going to be your partners, right? Those are going to be the people that you truly rely on for the success of your program, right? In those different areas that you're hosting. And so, as much as physical space tells the story, for us, especially once we know, again, going into it, using great resources like HopSkip, by the time we're citing, we sort of know that, hey, this is going to fit
Right.
physically, but now, yeah, is the feel right? And that's the harder thing to define, especially over phone conversations or over the internet, that sort of thing. And that's why we're going out and conducting those site visits.
And that's one of the many benefits I'd imagine that your clients get from partnering with companies like yourself, because you have those years of experience to be able to make those calls and make those judgments. But on the flip side, what are some of the common mistakes that you see planners making today when evaluating and choosing
Mhm.
venues for events, and how can they avoid them?
I'll go back to exactly that. I think being sold on the space and not diving a little bit deeper into the actual relationship and team that you're going to be able to have,
Right.
right? I'll go look in just an amazing venue and be thoroughly convinced that this is where we need to be, and then start to ignore some of those warning signs. And it might not even be the staff. It might be the idea that, well, we don't quite have enough time to load in or load out, or transportation here is going to be difficult, or just a whole host of different things that you tend to overlook. And I think we've all experienced that in any buying situation, right? That idea that we sort of get this enthusiasm and make up our minds and then forget all of these other warning signals that we should be paying attention to, and then ultimately end up with maybe a little bit of buyer's remorse. And so that's what we want to do, is we want to ultimately be very realistic, somewhat analytical, of course, but at the same time, I go back to that idea of, can we overcome the challenges that are here, especially through those strong relationships, through those strong supplier partnerships, as well as, are any challenges that we might have going to be outweighed by just the pure joy that the attendees will experience by being at this venue? I can think of a time that we were outside of Siena in Italy for an incentive program in a 1,000-year-old monastery that was just
Wow.
absolutely incredible. But the rooms were a little strange. There was very little consistency. And as an incentive program, it was actually very important, especially historically for this particular client, that it was very hierarchical as far as, the top performers got a certain type of room, then the next level got a different type of room, and the next level and on down. Well, we really didn't have that, right? We've had this mismatch of different room types. But ultimately, that idea of, well, so-and-so needs to be in a suite and such needs to be in a junior suite, and then we need a standard room for them, that all kind of went out the window. But it didn't matter. When people arrived there, it was just such an amazing location
That's
that
awesome.
we overcame that in a second. So, yeah.
Love hearing stories like that. And I think you nailed it too. I mean, this industry is built on relationships, and it really does come down to, you know, working together as a team and not looking at it necessarily as a transactional booking, but looking at it as a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
All pieces of the puzzle to work together. Let's go a little deeper and talk about handling kind of unexpected challenges. I'm sure you've had to encounter those in your career. Like, no matter how much planning goes into an event or meeting, things come up. How do you pivot when something unexpected threatens the flow or the feel of the event, or maybe even, you know, the event from actually occurring?
Those situations, unfortunately, are common. So often, planners are faced with pretty stringent parameters around which their event is to be hosted, and for good reason. You know, companies, let's say in the case of like a sales kickoff, they have very specific sets of dates where, hey, we're going to be ready at this point. We need to have it executed by the end of Q1, but can't start before January 31st, let's say. So now we've got this 2-month pattern, and we're located in the Midwest, so we want to keep it within 500 miles and, you know, a certain number of people. So all of those different parameters suddenly box you into, let's say, a limited number of choices.
Sure.
And that can be difficult. And then not to mention the idea, like we've already talked about, those other things like budget, for example.
Right.
You know, that limits our selection pool even deeper and deeper. And so ultimately, I think the first thing that can help in those situations is truly being fully informed, really knowing that you've gone out and conducted an extensive and complete search, and really are able to come back and actually present a full set of options to stakeholders. Because at that point, then people can feel a little bit more comfortable if some of those parameters that felt like they were set in stone now need to be shifted a little bit. So whether that's pattern or location, maybe some flexibility around even agenda. We've seen, you know, people, hey, we normally do a 4-day. Maybe we need to reduce this down to a 3-day and get a little bit more exact, or even 2.5 with our content. So there's a lot of different adjustments that can be made. That's why it's so important to really be confident in your site research and understanding, hey, these are truly our options, and here's what we're able to work within.
That's really well said. And that's something that at HopSkip, I mean, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves today to make sure that, you know, we're constantly updating our platform to have the latest and greatest properties, whether it's, you know, new hotels, rebrandings, closures, because we know how vital it is for companies like yours to be able to present full range of options that fit into the client's parameters. So I'm glad you touched on that. Do you have any examples or stories from your career where the choice of the venue really did change the outcome? Like, it ended up making the difference in the event success? I know we spoke a lot about, you know, the team dynamics, but has there ever been an example in your day where, you know what, we would have not achieved what we did achieve with this event unless we booked at that specific venue?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And again, it in many cases has come down to the team at those different properties, which has been amazing. Right. So certainly making sure that the fit was there, again, that we're in the right place, parameters and requirements that the group needs. But then from there, we've just seen time and time again. And so many of my stories, those incentive programs like the one I shared in Italy, just amazing incentive locations that we've been to. They're absolutely the downtown tier 2 city, you know, venues where people have come in. One of my favorites was actually just coming back post-pandemic. We hosted in Kansas City, rather large event. I think it was several thousand people. And it was the first large event that was back at the Kansas City Convention Center, and then utilized several hotels throughout. And so, of course, there was a lot of the different social distancing and safety parameters that we were still going through post-pandemic. But the entire Kansas City hospitality community came together to welcome this group and allowed us to do things in different outdoor venues and move people through both the convention center and then in and out of their hotels, and still keep bars open, for example. And I believe it was absolutely the choice of that location the enthusiasm of just that entire sort of professional community that helped us just create an incredible event.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And just to clarify for the folks that are listening, when we're talking about the team, the local team, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that could mean, the hotel sales team that you're considering booking the event at, but it could also be maybe a CVB or DMO and other local suppliers that all kind of have to play as one cohesive unit to get
Absolutely.
the job.
It came down from the moment we even arrived in the airport. There's the level of enthusiasm of the transportation company.
Wow.
And their ability to make everybody feel comfortable. And then arriving at the hotel, the way those arrivals worked and just bringing everybody back and excitement on the faces of everybody. So yeah, when I'm saying team, I absolutely mean your local operator.
Even like with the right venue, sometimes you do, or location or team, sometimes you have to elevate the energy.
Mm-hmm.
What are some ways you adapt a space to better match the vibe or experience you're trying to create for the event?
Absolutely. So often, of course, we want to understand what is the content during the general session? What are we doing at breakouts? What do the evening events look like? Networking receptions, all of those sorts of things. And then when we're done at 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock at night, okay, so we're sort of done. These folks are on their own. We want to go beyond that, right? We want to consider what are the different things that we can do to make people feel comfortable and enhance their overall experience. And so, like I've mentioned, if we're perhaps in a remote location, maybe it's a matter of including additional lounge areas or workspace areas where people can come and feel comfortable to hang out during unstructured times. If we're in large metropolitan areas, sort of leaning into that and offering additional activities or maybe pre and post event options, or in certain cases, we see types of events where spouses or even families are coming. So being considerate of that when our attendee is going to be at the event, what are the different activities or options or structured items that we can put together for guests or families. So all kinds of specific examples as far as maybe the right kind of music or entertainment, or partnering with our venue partners to make sure that bars are open perhaps over different hours than are typical. Thinking about thoughtful layouts, arranged seating, and like I said, lounges, different things in a way that encourages people to hang out. We've absolutely helped properties even transform those common spaces. It might be the lobby or other areas that we recognize an opportunity. Hey, if we just put in something simple like board games, we've seen be a huge hit. Card games. Suddenly people are hanging out and enjoying themselves in the common spaces, not really even in the meeting space of the hotel. Don't make them feel like, oh yeah, we've got a lounge, but you've got to walk all the way back here in the back and it's just 4 walls and no windows. And nobody really wants to hang out there anyway. Making sure that your hotel partner understands your goals and objectives, understands the experience that you're trying to put together. And so often when we start with that, they actually get into it with us. Some of the best ideas actually come from them.
Super helpful. What would you say to the planners out there that might be a little frustrated or struggling, either searching for that right venue but nothing's really clicking, or having challenges creating that kind of dynamic, cohesive team environment to kind of all run the ball through the finish line for the event? What would be your kind of one piece of advice to those planners on how to overcome those challenges?
Ultimately, it comes back to leaning into those relationships in your community. Rely on your peers, reach out. Nobody should operate in a vacuum or in a bubble. So often planners, there's a lot of work to be done. They work internally within an organization. They feel the pressure of being tasked with the entirety of their programs. And even based on their job descriptions, that, hey, this is my job. I have to go figure this out and get this done. And I think even just by the nature of being a planner, they just are independent. They're problem solvers. Right. And they grind and they go do it, and they're hesitant to raise the hand and say, hey, I could use some help here. I think that's the biggest thing is build that community. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to reach out to organizations. all of your different partners. There could be great ideas coming from your transportation partner or your production partner or your third party, like a GoGather, people, at HopSkip. Absolutely. Reach out and let them know, here are the challenges that I'm facing. And I'd love to brainstorm with you and see if we can overcome it.
Brian, you nailed it. This has been incredibly insightful. I know our listeners will take a lot of practical wisdom from today's call, all about finding how to maximize the right venue for your events. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your expertise and experiences with us today. Where can folks find out more about GoGather, your company?
Yeah, website, gogather.com for sure. But of course, very active on LinkedIn, as well as other social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook. But ultimately, our goal is to just be out there and interacting and participating in the market. So conversations like this are incredible for us, and we really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Brian. Have a good one. Thanks,
You
guys.
too.